of the group. So I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Y'all don't see that?
Hold on, look in your inbox. I'm about to show you.
On my screen, all it's showing
it's got image support.
Yeah, it's just showing screenshots, so it doesn't show like a live streaming.
We're live on Facebook and
okay, well, if we're live on Facebook, then I can share it that way. That's not a problem at all.
Yeah, because it's showing that I'm in.
There's a way to share it from here, so I got it.
Let me see. I just can't. I'm trying to figure out how to.
Oops.
Okay, let me.
So we can go and.
Sorry, y'all.
Okay, y'all ready? Is everybody ready?
I'm ready.
Great. Okay.
Here, y'all mute your stuff.
Hello, everyone. We was having some technical difficulties a minute ago, but we got everything straight. And welcome. This rally is being brought to you by Plus Party, which is the revolutionary grassroots organization. Our founding members saw the nonprofit way of doing things were becoming more and more ineffective, so we've chosen a more revolutionary approach. This rally will be our first public rally. We must have a more revolutionary approach because society convinces the majority that there are certain ways in which we should do things. And this plays into the hands of the oppressor. And clearly we are not on the same side. The mission of this rally is to change the mental conditioning of the people, leaders, and the language. Reform is no longer an option, so we must unite, educate, organize, and fight by any means necessary to do completely away with the mannerisms of the justice system. We must establish a unified coalition of coalitions and move as one huge power force from state to state, inside and outside the prison, from federal to state institutions. We're adding more boots to the ground to materialize this vision because we will not continue with the same strategy as before. Please continue to watch the rally on both days so we will be answering your questions and giving an important call to action. We are also looking to add members who will promote the same vision and help us overturn justice the way leaders have chosen to define it. Okay, we have a number of speakers and topics. Today we'll be starting the discussion with Carlos Christian, who is an author and CEO of This Starts Within organization. Carlos was once incarcerated himself and has been able to make successful re-entry by changing his mentality and now mentors others to do the same. During his incarceration, he focused on rehabilitation and being a positive role model. He graduated from Marion Technical College with a degree in business management. Right, Carlos. Go ahead, Carlos.
Okay, hey, how's everybody out there in the cyber world? It's good to be a part of this event. I just want to take the time and just thank, Plus for, putting together this event, because it's definitely important and it's definitely needed for us to come together and make an impact in the way that things are, because we all understand that they are not operating in the way that they need to operate, because if they were, then we wouldn't look at the recidivism rate the way that it is. People getting released from prison and returning back to prison again. And this is our greatest issue. So out here in Ohio, the Starts Within organization, that's what we focus on, is making sure that once people get released from prison, that they do not have the mentality to get incarcerated again. I believe that one of the greatest injustices that we face is individuals who do not have the right information to make quality decisions. And that's what happens so often, is that you have people that's getting released from prison and they don't really have the right type of information to attack that mentality that they have developed to get incarcerated in the first place. So that's what we focus on. And I'm just excited to be, where I'm at right now and be a part of this. And one of the things that was left out in the introduction is that I'm a father. So I'm a father of 3 children. I got a 22-year-old about to be 23. I have an 11-year-old son, and I also have a 4-year-old baby girl. And it's just powerful to be able to see, you know, my children raise and become successful, just powerful to be able to give them the mentality that they need to have to be successful. And this is what, you know, starts within organization we promote out here in Ohio is say, man, how do we duplicate that story, and how important was it for me to turn it around while I was incarcerated? The reason why it's called Starts Within is because we say that it starts within. It starts within yourself, and it starts within your current situation. So what I was able to do is that I was able to literally get it together when I was incarcerated. When I was 19 years old, first off, the backstory is that I was 13 years old and I started to sell drugs. I got hit at 19 years old with a 10-year prison sentence. And that's when I realized that, you know what, this is not, you know, the life that I really want to live. That environment of being in prison was just something that was conflicting against my spirit. So then that's when I started to really get to work. And I started to say, man, you know what, I got to do something, man, with myself, because it's the person that I developed into that put me in this type of situation. I was 19 years old and I didn't look outside of myself and to figure out what my biggest problem was. I looked inside of myself and said that it was the way that I was thinking, which was the biggest problem that posed my biggest threat. So I started to really attack my mentality when I was 19 years old. And people say, man, well, how long did it take? It didn't take no time. 19 years old when I was incarcerated, when I was sitting on my bed and I was away from my son, who was 3 months old at the time. And I said, man, this is the biggest problem, is the way that I was thinking. It put me in this type of living conditions. And I got to come against that way of thinking. And what was that thinking? It was the thinking that said that, man, you know what, I got to get it by any means necessary. That means that I'm going to sell as much crack as I can possibly sell. I'm going to sell as much marijuana as I can possibly sell. And I'm going to, you know, lay anybody down who came in between me trying to get that done. And I was willing to do whatever, you know, at the end of the day, because I believe from my environment that if I had accumulated enough money, then I would have no more problems. That's what I believed. I believed that my solution was in the amount of money that I was able to obtain. So this is the mentality that, you know, not only me, but so many people who are in these communities, they develop the same mentality. They develop the same mentality out of desperation. And this is one of the greatest issues, because we find out that it puts us in places that we don't want to be. You know, it puts us in the grave, you know, bodied, or it puts us inside a prison doing long stretches, you know. So a lot of times I hear people say that, you know what, hey man, people are in prison for nonviolent offenses. And I said, man, you know what, hey man, I mean, I had a violent offense because I got incarcerated for attempted murder, possession of drugs, drug trafficking, possession of firearms, and people might put me in a category and say, you know what, and you in a different category, and you the person, you know, that need. But at the end of the day, is like, what I understood is that, man, when I'm out there selling dope, man, I'm ready to get it in at any given time, because drugs and violence, they go hand in hand. So a lot of times I believe that it's a smokescreen that we get when we hear, man, hey man, nonviolent offense, man, you know, hey, don't look, man, at the end of the day, if I'm out there selling dope, I'm gonna be in a position to cause violence. So what we do is we say, we come against that whole mentality and say, man, throw away the idea that selling dope is a thing to do at the end of the day. Because if you selling dope, then you putting yourself in a position to get incarcerated. And when I was 19 years old, I said that, man, hold up, man, this stuff ain't right. And the reason why I say that it wasn't right is because when I started to, you know, do some reading, and I started to get my coattail pulled by other individuals who was incarcerated as well, older individuals who knew certain parts of the game that I didn't know, and they gave me information. And that's what started to body slam that mentality that got me incarcerated. And that information that they gave me was, first, was the 13th Amendment. And they said, Carlos, man, you know you're a legal slave, right? And I said, man, yeah, I know it's like slavery. They said, no, brother, you are a legal slave. I said, man, I know it's like slavery. And they said, brother, listen, look at the 13th Amendment, the Constitution, the law of the land. And I said, man, what are you talking about? And when I read the 13th Amendment, and it said that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except for as punishment for a crime for the party who have been duly convicted shall exist in the United States or any other place subject to their jurisdiction. I said, hold up, you mean the only way that I can be a slave in the United States of America is if I get convicted of a crime and it serves as punishment? You mean to tell me that Walmart, Target, Hewlett Packard, and all of these bigger companies, Honda, they getting work done inside of the penitentiary now, paying me 22 cents an hour, giving me a 3-cent raise after 3 years and up to 25 cents an hour, and they making millions off of this? You mean the furniture factory that at the institution that I'm incarcerated at, they making business furniture and selling those business desks to companies outside in the outside world, and they done made 50 million last year off of my 22 cents an hour that they are paying me. So then that's when I said, hold up, man. Now you saying that so the reason why they have the ability to be able to do that is because I am a legal slave by the Constitution. So then I don't have to get paid the minimum wage that is required by other citizens in the United States of America. So this is the type of information that I needed to really abandon that mentality and said, man, you know what? I'm not about to continue to live a life like this. I'm not about to continue to embrace a mentality that has got me incarcerated, because this mentality has put me in a position to be a legal slave. Now, this is when it gets good. Because I said that, man, if I put myself in here, then I can do the work to put myself out of here and not to get incarcerated ever again. But not only that, but if I do the necessary work, then I'm almost for sure to impact my child, my son, who is 3 months old, and he would be 10 when I got released from prison. I'm almost for sure to give him the information that he needs to not get incarcerated. And how is that going to be done? Is because I'm going to develop the mentality that contradicts incarceration. So then therefore I don't have to really wait for everybody else to come in alignment for me to get successful. I don't have to wait for people to say that it's okay for me not to be incarcerated, for me not to get incarcerated. Because one thing that I realize is that, man, it is people out in society that is not getting incarcerated. If it is if it is 7.6 billion people in the world, out of that, how many people is getting incarcerated? You know, I don't know how many people is in America, but it's about what, 500 million? Somebody help me out. How many people is in America? What's America's population? Nobody knows? Well, let's say it's 500 million. Well, if it's 500 million in America's population, there's 2.3 million people that's incarcerated. So then that means that it is a whole bunch of people that is not getting incarcerated. I need to know what all of those people who are not getting incarcerated, how do they move? Because I want to move that same exact way. So what we believe that starts within organization is that we got to get the people the information so then they can move in a way that will not get you incarcerated, because we understand that it is people who has a mentality that does not get them incarcerated. This is our greatest solution. Everybody knows the problem. The problem is that we got people that are incarcerated. We got people who get reincarcerated after they get released. We know and we identify the problem. We understand that. Now, what is the solution? The solution is that we got to get the people who are getting incarcerated the information that they need to have so then they don't get reincarcerated ever again. When I was incarcerated, one thing that I did is that I got into first scripture, and I started to let that saturate my mind to start to become this different individual that was going to contradict prison. And then I left from there and I got into business management, administrative office technology, also as well in vocational training. And I just gave my all to learn the information so I can become successful. Again, all of this was needed for me to start to think in a different way. The foundation of what we are on out here is like, how do we get people to think in a different way? When I'm coming in contact with the juveniles in the juvenile facilities, when I'm coming in contact with the individuals in the adult facilities, one thing that we say is that we got to start to think in a different way. We cannot continue to put ourselves in the mouths of the beast and expect the beast not to chomp down on us, because that is what the beast is designed to do. So what we got to do now is we got to say, man, we got to step away from the mouth of the beast. We can't put ourselves in the mouth of the beast and say, man, you done chomped down too hard. because that's what the beast does. So with that being said, what is the programming about? And that's the section that I want to cover in this rally, is the type of programming that we do out here in Ohio. And what we have been able to do is we put a group of individuals inside of a year-long class, and we put 20 individuals that we work with throughout the year. Same 20 individuals, and we cover 5 different modules. The 5 modules that we cover is parenting for 8 weeks. We cover cognitive behavior therapy for 8 weeks. We cover financial literacy for 8 weeks. We cover employment readiness for 12 weeks. And then we cover small business and entrepreneurship for 12 weeks. We contract professors from different colleges to come in and teach those classes. And one of the things that we have that is unique with the programming is that it is ran by an individual who have actually been incarcerated. Right now it is me, because I'm one of the founders of the Starts Within organization, and I'm the program manager for that actual program, the Walking Logo. And I come in and I am alongside with the professors who are teaching as well. That means that I am the bridge between the professors and the actual individuals who got incarcerated, because a transference of information cannot happen if there's not no relationship established. That means that if I don't relate to who you are, I'm not about to receive your information. You can be well-intent, you can have good intentions all you want, but if I don't believe that you come from where I come from and your information that you have applied to me, I will reject your information. So now what we do is that we put a person such as myself, and the way that we are going to expand it is by putting other people who have been able to overcome prison as well in front of the people and say that, you know what, this is how we get it done. Man, this is the information that I have applied to my life to be able to live in a whole different way, because people cannot be what they can't see. And this is the issue. So a part of that information that the brothers need to have is information to say that it is possible. So when I go in there, I say, brother, it's possible. Yeah, I know, I came, I got released. All of this, man, is possible to overcome the mentality to get you incarcerated. But not only is it possible, but this is the direction that you need to take to get it accomplished, because people lack motivation if they have no direction. So a lot of times people need to see the direction for them to really be motivated. So now once they start to see and say, man, you know what, man, I can do this, because this brother got my similar story, or his story is even more challenging than my story. I might just have a drug case or whatever may be the case. So his story is more challenging than my story. And now that gives the people the belief that they can be more than what they currently are, and they can go places further than where they are at, which is key. And once they get there, now they are in prime position to be able to start to receive the information. So now the information that we teach inside of our program is that we touch on the parenting piece, how to establish a strong, positive relationship with your children. But also what we do is we teach the financial literacy piece. And this is big, because what we realize is that inside a prison, the guys who are incarcerated, so we have the facilitator come in and she teaches then how to establish your credit, how to, you know, how to establish your checking account, bank account, and things like that, how to do your budget and things like that. And she teaches these things. But the thing about this is what we realize is that, I mean, people don't know. Why? Because that information is just not circulating around in our neighborhoods, and that's just the reality of it. And one thing that people don't know is how to read their credit reports, how to establish their credit. So when you ask a person the question is, what is the 3 credit bureaus? And they say, man, the 3 credit bureaus is American Express, a Visa, and, you know, and it's like, what, brother? No. But that's the information that they have. So what we've been able to do is we've been able to pull actual credit reports while people are incarcerated. So the people who are inside of our programs, we pull their credit reports, right? Now, when the administration, they ask me, they say, you are you are sacrificing their identity. You are putting them in a position for identity theft. And I said, no, I mean, actually what's happening is that they are in a position for identity theft anyway, because they got loved ones that are out there who may be pulling their credit and establishing things in their names and allowing those accounts to go delinquent. So what happened? When we pulled the credit reports, what happened was that we was able to see on these brothers' credit reports that were not theirs. So then that means a guy said, man, I was locked up in 2012. I get released and I get released next year. This was a couple of years ago in 2017. I got DirecTV bills on my name that was established in 2015. I got electric accounts that went delinquent in my name at houses that I've never been at. I've been incarcerated since 2011. How could that be? Well, you got people that you love that's out there that know you are incarcerated and they are taking advantage of your identity, good brother. So now, instead of looking at a mock credit report, we say we want you to look at your own credit report and we want you to dispute what's on your own credit report. Because now what that does is now you will dispute what's on your own credit report, send it to Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, get it wiped off of your credit report and let them know that, man, hey, listen, man, I've been incarcerated since 2011. Here goes my incarceration record. I've been incarcerated since 2011. There's no way that that account can be mine. It gets wiped off of your credit report. But why is that so important? Everything is about information. We got to attack the mentality that gets people incarcerated. We got to attack this culture that continues to produce that mentality. So now what happens when that individual has that information on how to read their credit report, how to establish their credit, what happens with that information? That individual gets released from prison and he goes back into the community that he's come up out of, and he gives the community that information. And this is how you get a real live movement, because at the end of the day, brothers who are incarcerated still has influence of the brothers who are in the streets. The people who are in the community, that person who gets released, people know. I don't know if people out there, they know how the parties are for the brothers who get released, especially if you are somebody who have really, man, put in some real live work inside of your community, like as far as that is concerned, to get incarcerated. When you get released, it's like blocks get shut down for the right person who returns back to the community coming from prison. People celebrate people coming back from prison more than they celebrate a person coming back, graduating magna cum laude. You know, like they celebrate brothers who come back from prison more than that, or more than people come back from a war. So if that person gets released from prison with the right information and he still holds the influence with his community, now you can start to inject the community with that information that is needed to start to think in a different way. We got to think in a different way in order to be able to overcome this whole prison movement, to reduce the prison population. We got to think in a different way. And I look at it as an opportunity. You got 2.3 million people incarcerated. I look at it as an opportunity to give brothers the information that they need so then they can start to come against it. Because now where I'm at right now, and I don't know how much time, I know I'm running low on time, but where I'm at right now is that I'm in a position to where I'm feeding my children the information. I came home and my son's mother said, raise our son to be a man. And I was able to get my son when he was 10 years old. He graduated from high school, he went to college, and he didn't stay, but he started to do some other things. And now he's a father and he's taking care of his children. But he's doing these things because he's adopted a different mentality than I had when I was his age. But that's because I'm in place to be able to help him have the mentality that he needs to have to be able to be successful. My son is 11 years old. I'm raising him in a way to where he's expecting different than I expected when I was 13 years old. He's not getting the same information that I got when I was 13 years old because he's getting it from me because I'm in place to be able to give him the information that he needs. So now my daughter, who is 4 years old, she is getting the information that she needs to have. She's understanding of what a man looks like and how a man should interact with her. So she's not in these crazy relationships. My son is understanding how to be a man himself by what he sees. So then that's why it is so important to get to the people who are incarcerated. The value of that individual who is incarcerated is through the roof. Because if that person can get the information, we can change the world. And that's what I believe. Because if we got 2.3 million people thinking in a different way, then we got the opportunity to really take it to another level. Now we're not sitting up there asking, can we have a piece of the pie? We actually are making our own. And that's what changes the game. I had an issue with when I got released, and I'm gonna close it out with this story. I had an issue when I got released. In 2007, right when the economy was declared the Great Recession. And I remember when I was trying to go to one of the nice neighborhoods, and I said, man, I want to go to that neighborhood, you know, different from the neighborhood that I come from, you know, where I'm not in this type of environment, so I can continue to work on myself and continue to be the individual that I know that I need to become. And when I went and applied for that application, now I'm working now. I just stacked up about $3,500 when I was in the halfway house. I stacked up $3,500. I did 6 months in the halfway house. And I said, man, I stacked up $3,500. And when I come up out of the halfway house, I said, man, I'm gonna go right into my own apartment, because I didn't want to just be staying with somebody else or my father at the time. So I said, I'm gonna go into my own apartment. So I said, I'm gonna go and stay in an okay neighborhood. It was Lakewood outside of Cleveland. It was the suburbs of Cleveland. I said, man, I want to stay there. When I filled out the application, immediately they said that, man, you know what, you got a background that we cannot allow you to stay in our neighborhoods. We will not rent to you. And they said, man, where you can go, though, is over there on 30th and Carnegie. If anybody knows anything about Cleveland, that's right by the projects, right? So they said, you can go over there and they will rent to you. And that's where I had to go, was off of 30th and Carnegie in Cleveland, Ohio, right by the projects, right? Where the roaches and critters were at in my apartment. And that's where I had to stay, right? But I didn't stay there complaining. I stayed there with my head up high, because at the end of the day, it was better than the prison that I came from. Now, fast forward to where we are at now. So right now, I've been home for 12 and a half years, going on 13 years. And right now, I'm able to just close on the house in April the 17th. So now my idea with this renting is like, why not buy the housing ourselves? Why not buy houses in the good neighborhoods? And then once we buy houses in the good neighborhoods, now we are in a position as landlords to rent to people who have felony records. So now we don't have to continue to come to the table to people who don't identify with where we're coming from. So
thank you, Brother Carlos. We kind of went over your time limit.
Okay. So these are the solutions that we are coming with, and this is what it's all about. So this starts within organization. We say before change can be seen externally, change must be done internally. It's going to take the people to get behind the movement for it to really move anywhere. A movement is not a movement unless the people get behind it and push it. And with that being said, that's my time. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you. Okay, the next speaker is Jody Rose, an advocate for prisoners. She's a motivational speaker and an author. She runs the Inmate Incarcerated Loved Ones page. So it's the Inmate Support Incarcerated Loved Ones Facebook page. You can go ahead, Jody.
Unmute your mic, Jody.
I'm sorry. Hey, everybody. What I was saying was, as Carlos was, you know, it's hard to say all that we want to say in 15 minutes. So it doesn't stop today. It doesn't stop tomorrow. We have to take this and we have to expand, because 15 minutes is not enough to tell you what we need to tell you, but we want to tell you because we need all of you. I heard an advocate say yesterday, well, if you're not with me, then I'm going to move on, or something that they had said. And I thought, nobody should not, because what we are doing is anyone can do it. Okay. So I want to start today with reading something. Now I want you to understand what I'm reading. I'm reading in an interview in 1994. This was by journalist Dan Baum. So in case you want to look this up, let me write my time down because I'm really hard at yeah. And he was interviewing John Ehrlichman. And John Ehrlichman was President Nixon's domestic policy chief, okay, in 1971. But the interview that I'm about to read, and some of you already know this, was from 1994, okay? So these were the exact words in quotes that he said. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or against blacks. But by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know that we were lying about drugs? Of course we did. Okay, that is mind-blowing because that is the beginning. Being the history teacher that I am, I teach high school history. I'm going to go back a little bit, and I'm not going to bore you with a big history lesson, but you really need to know to understand really where this all happened. I mean, why? Well, you know, people say, oh, it's terrible, but you really kind of need to know, you know, what's going on. So in 1968, Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act. Okay, so we're going back to 1968. And that kind of gave, you know, wiretapping. That kind of opened up the, you know, and if we can wiretap people, we can catch people. I mean, I can wiretap my, you know, teenage daughter, you know what I'm saying? Like once we were able to wiretap people, of course, common sense is going to tell you crime is going to go up. Okay. So, so that's what this brought. It brought grants, more grants for more law. They wanted more law. They wanted more law enforcement because they were seeing an influx in crime. So, and I'm going to tell you in a minute why. It's so, you know, I saw a meme a few years back that said maybe the system isn't corrupt. It was built this way, and it was built this way. And you guys are going to find out today it was built this way. And so in the early 1970s, we had what was called intermittent sentencing. Okay, and what that was is that's where parole boards would go in. Someone would do their time. Parole boards would go in and say, you know what? According to this person's satisfactory behavior, of course, that again, common sense. If you reward somebody for having good behavior or earn time from working or you know, just getting up and going to work, they're going to probably do better so they can come home sooner, right? So this is what was going on, was the parole board was actually the ones who were going in and saying, okay, this person, you know, had satisfactory behavior, good earned time, they did, you know, work, the educational programs, the way that it should be, and the way that we're trying to get it back to be. So let's, this is the way that they controlled the prison population. So let's let them free if they've done good. Well, this led to criticism. And that, you know, that they were too soft on criminals. You know, we hear that, they're too soft on criminals. So by the late 70s, early 80s, states began. So a lot of people think that mandatory minimums, which we are about to introduce and talk to you about, is just a federal thing. I'll have people on our group pages, they'll go, oh, well, that's federal. And I'm like, you don't understand, it's not just federal, because anytime you see something federal, you see it trickle down to state. I mean, it just does. And if you'll really do, you know, your research, you'll figure that out. It's not just federal. It's like Cut 50, Topeka Sam's really fought hard for the Dignity Act. Yes, it was passed under the First Step Act that we're going to talk about in a minute. But she really worked now with the states, and that's where women can't be shackled anymore when they're pregnant at a certain, you know, trimester. They can't, you know, they get more sanitary napkins. So that filtered down to states, and we have several states that have actually enacted that and are, you know, doing that now. So we're at the late 70s, early 80s, the states begin to start doing, you know, looking at sentencing guidelines. They say, you know, we are not going to just let the parole board decide. We're going to put some guidelines. So in 1971, Nixon then declared a war on drugs. Okay. And this was aimed to stop illegal drug use, distribution, trade. And I mean, again, I can't do this in 15 minutes, but if you really go back to the history of this, during the Mexican Revolutionary War. And I promise I won't bore you with that. You'll realize why we had so much immigration, illegal drug use, many years later, of course, but really not many years later, because we're really only in the early 70s at this time. So they wanted to drastically increase these prison sentences for dealers and users. They said, okay, we're going to make examples out of them. But let's back up a minute, okay? So, like I told you, that you're going to understand where this tragedy in America started, okay? It actually started, again, like I said, in way, 1850s, but we won't go back that far. But in 1914, there was the Harrison Act. And that was Congress regulated and taxed distribution of opioids and cocaine. Okay. So they're saying you can do it, but we're going to tax it and we're going to regulate it. Okay. This is 1914. So we have what's going to happen. Our generations and our cultures are going to learn that, hey, I can use this as long as it's taxed, as long as it's regulated. Use it. The next generation, and so we've got these generations using these same, tactics. And then in 1937, we did see the Marijuana Tax Act. And again, that's a whole nother, ball game. So get this. So Nixon signed the 1970, right, Controlled Substance Abuse Act that I just told you about, that would regulate certain drugs, cocaine. 1971, a year later, the same president declared a war on drugs. I mean, you set this up this way. You set this up, and you see what I read that his chief, they did this. And again, I mean, what can we do about that now? But I want you to understand that these mandatory minimum laws weren't just, oh, well, we're just going to lock your loved one away for years and years. And I don't understand why administration after administration after administration has continued to follow these same harsh, inhumane laws. And they have, for whatever reason. But we'll get there. So 1986, that was the big year. And some of you are on here now are going to know exactly what I'm about to say. And that was when Ronald Reagan expanded. He wanted to expand the war on drugs. His wife did that. She did that she wasn't the red ribbon, but she was the war on drugs. It was this big thing. So they passed under the Reagan administration. It took very little time from the time it was brought to the House, to the Senate, to be signed. It was a month, I think, 5-6 weeks. It was and it was amended a lot of times, but it was the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, and it established the mandatory minimums, which was criticized for having racial ramifications again. And the reason why for that, and I know some of you are going to be blown away when I tell you this, but there were racial ramifications. So when you do hear people that have been in prison for years and years and say this was a racial situation, it honestly was, because 5 grams of crack cocaine, okay, 5 grams of crack cocaine, which was mostly used by African-American men, okay, gave a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence now, okay? 500 grams of powder cocaine, same thing, we just add something to make it crack, right? But it is predominantly used by white Americans, was 500 grams. 5 grams to 500 grams had the same penalty. That is why we saw so many people that were released last year on the crack cocaine laws, because they went back and said, you have got to be kidding me that this, this happened. And so, and during this time too, we saw like truth in sentencing, which is requiring the 85% that you guys see that your loved ones, abolishing parole. That was all truth in sentencing, because they were saying like, we have to have truth in sentencing, and someone's sentenced to 5 years, they need to do at least 85%. Well, they had already taken away programs. They had taken away good time. And I'm not saying totally, but the majority, they have taken all that away. So what's going to happen? You're not going to be earning that time. So you are going to be, you are going to be serving more of that sentence now that the parole board's not coming in. It was a one size fits all. A lot of you have heard, us say that. And it went from 50,000 drug offenses in 1980 to 400,000 drug offenses in 1997. And things we discovered was minimum mandatories. They didn't protect the law, or they don't protect the law. all they do is to disrupt the balance of justice, because what we are doing now with mandatory minimums is the prosecutors and the politicians are who are sending our loved ones to prison. Some people who have never stepped a foot in a prison, people, you know, judges don't have the discretion. Yes, they have the discretion to go to the lower end on federal. I'm not exactly sure in all states because we have different laws in different states, but they really don't have the discretion. We have had so many judges say, I didn't want to sentence them. That we've had judges leave their jobs as judges because they said, I just couldn't keep sending people away anymore. It was unbelievable that this man who or woman who has never been in trouble in their life, I'm having to give them 20 years because they had 2 guns, they had drugs, they, you know, these stacking charges were just unbelievable. And so what do you think happened now? So we're in 1986, 1987, 1988, we're rolling along. I mean, we're locking people up left and right. So what happens? We need more prisons, right? We need more prisons because now we're increasing so much. So here comes the Clinton administration, and they passed the 1994 Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. That did not, a lot of people think that had to do with, or that was the reason for the mandatory minimums. It wasn't. The mandatory minimums, as I've told you, really date back from the 60s, but you can really see it in 1986. But what that did, the Clinton administration, was it just ripped through communities because of the massive incarceration. And this is where we saw the 3 strikes, the mandatory life sentences. Now, we did see that during this administration. They wanted to hire, or they did hire 100,000 new police officers, 9.7 billion funding for new and expanded prisons. So they wanted to add to prisons that were already there and expand. I know some of you who've been doing this for years, you remember, like I remember when there was like 6 prisons in the state of Texas and 1 women's prison. And I you know what I mean? It was just unbelievable. And they expanded death penalty offenses. So it was atrocious. And so most of the funds were dedicated to punitive rather than rehabilitative. So this is where we really start seeing the decline in 1986, 87, all the way through 2000, or even through, what we're seeing recently. Our programs were gone. Like, we still see loved ones say, well, I can't get, because it's kind of like this. I live in West Virginia. Okay. I moved here 5 years ago from Texas. In Texas, we saw those Votex centers leave about in the 90s. I mean, not leave, but you could get auto body in high school, and you could get, that cosmetology and all that in high school. You really don't see that anymore because we have the big push for college, right? So what is that going to do? Okay. We're pushing everybody to go to college. So that's going to close Votex centers. Well, West Virginia really never got there because most of these kids really, they're not interested in that. They're interested in the blue collar jobs, the jobs in the mountains. So they have Votex centers in every high school here. And it's literally like a blast end of the 90s, but that's what happened. Like, we took it away. And we're having to slowly now. Texas, that's where my point there. Texas wants to go back to the Votex. What do you think they're going to have to do now? They're going to have to build it. They're going to have to build programs. They're going to have to prove, budget money. It's going to take years and years to get back to that. And that's what I feel like is going on, with us. So we didn't really see much reform until the Obama administration, which, as most of you know, was around 2013. Attorney General Holder and the Department of Justice launched a comprehensive review of the criminal justice system. And what this was called Obama Clemency 2014. And this is where you guys come in. That is very important, because this is where I want to really teach you, and we want to teach you to advocate for those who just say, well, I don't even know where to start. I don't know what to do. If that specific time your loved one qualified and you did not get the paperwork in, let's say between, I think it was like April to October of the next year, I think, but if you didn't, you don't even qualify. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So like, just like with this COVID-19, if you didn't get your paperwork in that was specific to what it is, it's not over yet, but in a couple more, probably another month or two, as things start, it'll probably be, that's it. There's a limited window that you as the loved ones have to know, because if you don't know that, that's huge to not be able to, do that. So we did see, the Obama clemency 2014, there were several hundred that were, granted clemency or commutations on that. We're seeing a major overhaul of the criminal justice system with the First Step Act. It is slow. People are already like, well, my loved one hasn't been moved 500 miles, but you guys, this takes a while. This takes time to repair. But with the First Step Act, offenders can earn more good time. They can move closer to home if their programs, that meets. There's no restraints. That's already in place for the pregnant women, the dignity part, more female products, sentencing reform. We're just seeing a lot of sentencing reform, you guys. We are seeing, let me see, 15. Okay. And I know that I'm almost there. I have like 2 minutes. So I want to wrap it up with saying, these are the things that you can do to help. And we are going to expand on this. We're going to actually do some Zoom meetings on just specific advocating. But the first thing you do is you need to get educated. And I don't mean by, being in drama groups on Facebook and wasting your time with people who don't want change. I don't mean reading fake news articles. I don't mean things like that. I mean, read your laws. You've got to go in there and figure out exactly what it is that you're asking for. You can't just call legislation anymore and say, we want change. That's not going to work. We have to go in there and say specifically, use their verbiage on it. We want change. Your policy says this, whatever it is, but you've got to become educated. And I mean, that's so important. Number 2, you need to network. You need to leave all the drama groups, like I said, and you need to find your people. You need to find Amy Povich is who taught me from ground up. I met her in Washington, D.C. I never thought I'd have my kids and be in Washington, D.C., but you have to find your people. FAM is probably my number 1 resource. And this isn't an advertisement for FAM because FAM doesn't need an advertisement. This is to tell every single one of you, FAM, you can find everything you need on FAM to get started, and then you're going to have to do your work. And last but not least, take breaks and don't, it's exhausting work to do this. It's exhausting. Don't give up. There's too many of us out here now that we can support each other. But the main thing is having the confidence to know, to get started. Message me, comment with questions, and you guys know, you come in my inbox, I am going to help you get started. I want to thank Plus for doing this. And just it's unbelievable. And you guys, I'm closing with this. We need a revolution. We need a revolution. We can't just say, oh, we need change. Okay, we'll pray for you. It's not working anymore. We need every single one that views this today, next week, next year, next month to get on board. Okay. All right. Well, thank y'all. And I look forward to some of your questions at the end.
Thanks, Jody. Next, we'll have Maurice Clifton, and he is the founder of SAIL, SIPPY's Advocacy, Initiative, and Leadership, Inc. He was born and raised on Mount Bayou, Mississippi, and served 23 years for a first-time nonviolent drug offense. He now advocates for the incarcerated while mentoring and assisting the children of incarcerated parents. Mr. Clifton?
Right, thank you, Nicole. Hey, how you doing, everybody? Good afternoon. Well, I want to touch bases on a couple of things. I know I'm solely speaking on juvenile justice, but I just want to reiterate some of the things that Carlos said and give him a big ups for what he's doing after being incarcerated. Also, I want to also say that for Carlos, that the only way an individual is going to change is that he makes a conscious decision to change inside. It's rare and few that we find guys like you and I who have made the decision to change, because I came home with a 720 credit score. I came home with a mind and a mindset to help other people that I left behind. So I think it's up to the individual. We can take him the information, but if he's not ready to receive that, then, it's like a barrier and stuff like that. So big ups to you. Also, Jody, another thing, I'm a product of that mandatory minimum sentence. I went in January 1997 as a first-time drug offender, where I was charged with aiding and abetting the sale of 6.4 grams of cocaine. I received a 400-month sentence. Now, we talk about prison reform. The law changed in 2008 that should have sent me home on immediate release. They didn't. So the prosecutors are in all the districts are holding the power. And though the law has changed, they're dragging their foot about applying the law to the people who are most deserving, which are African American. I seen more Hispanic get action at the First Step Act, the first crack law and the second crack law than any African American. So they were letting white guys go who got caught up in a crack conspiracy and Hispanic guys go who were caught up in a crack conspiracy. So we talk about reform. Reform is not going to happen until we change the mindsets of the prosecutors. The prosecutors are still being racially biased when applying this law. For instance, the law changed, the First Step Act came. My 2008 crack law is still pending on the docket sheet. My family spent countless of money hiring an attorney to apply that. They never answered. I filed writ of mandamus. The prosecutor never answered. 2010, the law changed again. Then they had the 2-point reduction. All these, you can look at my cases, 397 CR 006. It's still pending on the docket sheet. Until I got grassroots people behind me like Amy, who you spoke of, and other people, Stones Who Crowd, and other organizations behind me to start calling these prosecutors, and the ACLU and the NAACP start calling them, say, why are all his motions still pending when he's a first-time offender and the law applies? Only then did the judge decide to relinquish his authority over my case and gave me immediate release about 4 months ago in 2020 of this year. The law changed in 2018. And as far as those programs that you're talking about, they still haven't implemented a good time from the First Step Act being passed. So you got a lot of guys who haven't got their 7 days. They're sitting in jail waiting on their 7 days when it's just a push of a button and they can apply it. So it's the district courts and the probation office who are holding the guys in prison who are due immediate release hostage, men and women. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about juvenile justice. The reason I wanted to speak on juvenile justice because while I was incarcerated, I seen a lot of youngsters that came from the juvenile detention center over to the federal penitentiary with a life sentence. So I'm talking about, well, let's speak about one in particular. I want to say Tony Sparks, and he was from Killeen, Texas. He was riding in a car with some guys that committed a crime on Fort Hood Army base. Good kid. He was German. He was born in Germany. His dad was in the military. His mom was German, but he got caught up, and because he refused to testify on the guys that he was riding with, the prosecutors gave him a life sentence at 16 years old. He had never been in trouble, had never committed a crime, had never had a girlfriend. So he's sitting in penitentiary with a life sentence. So how does you send a child that comes into the penitentiary with a life sentence and expect him to survive? He either has to become a monster or become a victim of other monsters who are in prison. So he has to learn how to survive. This prison is his first training ground. Now, I've been doing a lot of research on juvenile justice, even especially here in Mississippi. There are about 80 juvenile prisons across the United States. When I say prison, I mean they're ran just like the penitentiaries that are in for adults. The people don't want to, most of them are older prisons, but they want to call them audit homes. They want to call them care centers for kids and stuff like that. But what I find out in calling, I call a lot of people before my interview because I like to do my research. I call a lot of them and I say, okay, what's the ratio of whites and black as far as in the juvenile detention center? So I called a few in Mississippi and I noticed that the population was balanced. Okay, I said, if it's balanced, if we make up only 13% of the population worldwide, and I'm speaking of African American, why do we make up 70% of the prison population? And she said, well, one thing that I noticed, one of the counselors told me at 2 different facilities, one in Harris County and one in Jackson County, Mississippi, she told me that the thing is, those who have committed crimes and there are similar crimes, she said she gave me a case, and I won't reveal the name because they're still minors and they still have cases pending. But there was a juvenile who was 18 who was black and one who was white. They both had similar crimes. When they turned 18, they were scheduled to be released into society. They gave both of them, when they released the black guy, they just turned him out to the wolves. The white kid that they released, they found him an apartment, they found him a job, they sent him to school to get job training. And so I'm like, well, what was the difference? It said like they just dropped the ball. There was no urgency to to help the young black kid because they felt like that he was going to be a repeat offender. And she said most of the time that they don't help. And I said, okay. I said, well, what about and she said a lot of time it's the parents' fault. Now, I'm a product of a 2-parent home. I'm hustling because I made the choice to hustle, not because I had peer pressure or anything. And then a lot of kids that we see in juvenile detention, they don't come from 2-parent homes. The mothers are just tired, and what they don't know is that when they call the police on a child in elementary school, that goes on his record as a juvenile offense. And that same record transcends unless he gets some kind of adjudicated condition from the judge. That goes on his record when he becomes, if he becomes a convicted felon in prison. Let's just say he gets a first-time offense on a drug charge. Even though that's his first federal offense, his juvenile record is going to enhance him and move him to a different category and going to cause him to get more time. Though he's never been in trouble, only thing, he might have had a truancy, he might have had a disorderly conduct, and he might have had something where his mom just got tired of him from curfew and she called the police on him and they took him to the police station. So he has 3 prior misdemeanor on his record that's going to cause him to go from category 1 to category 2. I spent my time in the federal system. I went to prison sentenced as a kingpin, even though I was a first-time offender. I had quit hustling. And so because the people were mad, they placed me in a situation that caused me to get sentenced to a bunch of ghost dope. A lot of people don't understand that. And so I said that to say that kids, I think that when they stopped parents from disciplining their kids, they gave the kids too much power. So when they gave the kids the power to call the police on their parents, then the kids had the long arm of the police to protect them from their parents, from the discipline of the parents. Now, so the only thing that does though, it put them in the system. So the parents retaliated by calling the police on their children when they couldn't do anything with them, because if they punished them, they were going to get convicted or sent to jail for punishing them. So now the child who has the power up until he's about 15 or 16, or let's say 13, then they had a power. Now, when the mom called the police, she has just relinquished her power and turned him over to the system. Once he becomes a product of the system, man, it's hard for him to get out of that web of injustice. It's literally hard for him to get out of that web of injustice. And another thing that was troubling to me when I called some of these juvenile detention centers, you know that they had 4 or 5 10-year-olds that were in the juvenile justice system who had been given a term of 3 years in juvenile detention, 3 years at 10. So he's in 10 and he has a 3-year sentence to serve 3 years in the juvenile justice system. So now he's 13, he gets out already. The same thing with a child, when he comes out of one of these juvenile detention centers, the other kids look at him as a bad kid. So he already has a jacket on his back as being a trouble kid or a bad kid, and nobody wants to spend time and give him attention to find out, because most of the time when a child gets in trouble, it's from a lack of attention. So we have to spend more time on our kids to guide them off the path and give them constructive things to do with their hands, like carpentry, like if they're a little girl, beads making, or find anything, art. Send them to art school, find out what their passion is and try to hone in on that passion and feed their creative spirit. Because most of the time it's just them trying to find a way to fit in. You know what I mean? So we have stopped paying attention to those children and finding a way to allow them to fit in, or being a role model that they can follow and guide them. Most people in the street are so, especially in the drug game, they're so conditioned as using the child to do that dirty work, because the child can only get juvenile detention center. He's not going to go to jail for that long. So you have some cowards out there that are feeding the children and using them and causing them to thinking that he's looking out in their best interest because he's giving them $20 or $30. You know what I'm saying? So we have to stop. We have to, first of all, black men especially, we have to man up. We have to first lead the thing along that first sent us to prison. You know, we can't wait to prison and decide that, oh, now I'm incarcerated, I want to change. You understand? I bought my first house at 24, long before I started hustling, and it was legitimate. I was a straight A student in high school and college, so I have no reason to have been in the streets. I came from a 2-parent home. I'm my mother's 20th child. All of my sisters and brothers are educators, lawyers. I'm the only one. I'm the black sheep of the family. And I had no reason to even be incarcerated, even though I was wrongfully convicted. You know, because of so much pressure from my family, I quit hustling. But the powers that be in the state of Mississippi didn't want to see me. I was the game that got away. So they had to find a way to cast that net out and bring me back in fictitiously, and which you'll read more about, you know, later on in life. But like I say, back to juvenile justice, man, we have to take care of our kids and find a way to give them that creative spirit to where we can mold their minds into early advocacy and to teach them. They're taking 8-year-olds who are in trouble at school, they're taking them on tours, mandatory tours of the juvenile detention center to try to scare them. Man, these kids are not afraid of anything. You taking him in there, if you take an 8-year-old and he see his friend that he looks up to in there, then he's going to think that that's the way that he wants to go. So we have to find other ways, instead of showing them the place that they might be, find a way to teach them to become a productive member of society. And we have to stop sending our schools to major in things that makes them a better worker for somebody else. We have to teach them how to be their own entrepreneurs and create their own, go to school to become their own bosses. So when we start honing and planting them that creative spirit within them, then I think that we'll change the mindset of all of them. And we have to come out and tell them the horrors of prison, like the people that get killed. You know, they want to shelter them. A lot of people don't know. The only thing they think about prison is what they see on TV. You don't see half the killing. You don't see half the injustice, Jody, some of the things that Jody was talking about in prison. You don't see the people right now who are dying from COVID-19. You don't see the guards and the wardens discriminating against guys because of their skin color. You don't see them not caring if somebody lives or dies and won't give them the right medical attention. So the kids don't see that, so they don't really know what's going on. You know, I don't want to go over my time because I want to give everybody an opportunity to speak, and I welcome any question at the end. Thank you guys for listening, man.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Clifton. Next, we will have Professor Terrence Coffey. He is a graduate of New York University, where he currently teaches forensic justice and problem solving. Professor Coffey is one of the America's leading voices on criminal justice nationwide. His work has been highlighted in USA Today. And can we all please welcome Mr. Coffey?
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
All right. I want to thank everyone for allowing me to share in the space today, particularly the positive leaders united in solidarity. This has been a very interesting and intriguing conversation today. And, I heard Jody and I listened to everyone share. And, there are so many things that go through my mind when I hear these conversations that causes me to try to stay focused on a subject matter. But as you know, I like to say, there are so many layers to this discussion until there's almost not enough time, I think, in a lifetime to try to unravel. But one of the first things I want to share with everyone in regards to our criminal justice system, when we think of it from our current state and as well as from a historical lens, our criminal justice system is established on 4 pillars, supposedly. And that's to incapacitate an individual, that's to deter crime, that's to punish, And the last is to rehabilitate, which is where a lot of my work focuses on, particularly into reentry. Today, I'll be speaking on the politics of COVID-19 and compassionate release. But like Mr. Clifton, there are some things that I think that it would be amiss if I did not highlight on in regards to our conversation today. And that will have to take me back to something Jody said when she was speaking of when laws are passed at a federal level. And she's absolutely right. It's what I've coined, what I like to call trickle-down politics. And trickle-down politics says that something is passed at the federal level, hypothetically, let's say the 94 crime bill. The 94 crime bill instituted something what we call block grants. And block grants were introduced after the Clinton administration to encourage states with financial means and financial funding to implement what we saw as what we now today understand as mass incarceration. So this is why even at the state levels, when they say truth in sentencing with 85%, that's just why you can usually see this across the board, across from states, particularly after 1994, because of those block grants that not only militarized our polices, led to the expansion of private prisons, that led to what we all know as 85%, that led what we to know as what a lot of cuts in programs such as educational programs, such as housing opportunities, government benefit programs, and the list goes on. And one of the last things I think that I want to definitely highlight on is something Mr. Clifton just shared in regards to our youth. I've worked with Michelle Alexander on a lot of different projects, particularly into juvenile justice. And one of the things that I think that we miss sometimes when we think of our neighborhoods, and I don't want anyone to extract themselves from this conversation. Our youth are pretty much just like us. When we all grew up, it's something called environmental conditioning and adaptation. All of us grew up wanting to be with our friends and like our friends, et cetera, et cetera. And, there was never the idea, particularly in a youth's mind, because this is where we began to talk about the development of a child's mind. A child does not differentiate in the space of environmental conditioning the idea of what we may think as understanding right and wrong, particularly when that child is being raised in a community that we may see as saturated in crime, poverty, et cetera. So all these external factors. You can take that same child and you can look at any child in any community. And if you look at the environment, you'll notice that you'll see that child making adaptations to whatever's the norm. You go to a middle-class family, what you will see is 9 times out of 10, if everyone is going to college, playing football, playing whatever those things are, you'll 9 times out of 10 seeing that child want to do that. If you ask a child about what they want to grow up with, particularly when you have parents who are doctors, lawyers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they're more conditioned to say that I want to grow up to be like. If you find a child in a community such as this, you will hear them say things as, particularly when it comes to colleges, and their father or their mother went to this particular college, and when it comes to that time, they say, "What college are you?" It's what we call the normalcy of the environment in which an individual or anyone it may grow up in. The fact also remains for children in poverty-stricken communities. Unfortunately, when we think of poverty and we look at the criminal justice system in and of itself, we have a tendency to want to negate the external factors that play intimate and intricate role in that process. For instance, as Mr. Clifton shared, children in poverty-stricken communities who go to these various schools are four to five times more likely to be suspended, arrested, being harassed at the same infraction as any other child in any other school in any other part of America. Those are facts. And in doing this work, I think that, as has been said, it's particularly important for me to ensure that we have the factual basis. Now, are we left to the whims of these atrocities that we see? Of course not, because it's in these conversations that we begin to understand what role we need to play. And that role really becomes in a way of taking a more active role in the policy structure of academic institutions within these communities. So with there, I think I'm going to stop, but I just wanted to try to put try to encapsulate some of this of what we have discussed today from a micro, a meso, and a macro level, meaning that just like the gentleman who shared earlier when he said he's working with men one-on-one, that's one phase where we stay at the micro level. When we start thinking about the influence of institutions, let's say correctional institutions, Bureau of Prisons, or juvenile justice centers, that's at the meso level, because then we begin to see how we begin to advocate for policies at that level. And the larger, more broader conversation I would like to highlight on would be at the macro level, which is legislative change. A lot of what we've discussed today has really, for me, and Jody, I want to thank you for that briefing from a historical lens, particularly from the Nixon administration to the Reagan administration up to what we know as the Clinton administration, which instituted the '94 crime bill. For a lot of people who know me, they know that one of my greatest concerns and advocacy in the work that we do is to have the '94 crime bill repealed, because within that bill, in my opinion, we have a lot of the accentuating factors and issues that we are discussing right now. I think that as advocates, a lot of times what we do, we look at this tree called the criminal justice system, and we pluck the minimum mandatory, and we pluck the lack of funding, and we pluck all these various things off, but yet and still we're only plucking fruit off a tree that with time, as Michelle has said, will evolve into something else. As everyone may see now, it always comes back with something else. When I think the focus and the goal for all advocates, particularly when we think of mass incarceration as we know it, is to push for the repealing of the '94 crime bill. Now, I think with that said, I'm going to stop, and I said I would stop there, and I promise you I will, and I'm going to transition over to where we're at today with the COVID-19 crisis here in the United States, particularly in relations to the criminal justice system. Quick stats here in New York State, as of now, I think this number has went up. We have had 15 people who have died from COVID-19. Only 6 have been approved for what has been known as the medical parole or the compassionate release. And that number is striking because here in New York State, we have 42,000 people incarcerated. And I am sure that these numbers are only state and national trends for anyone who may be listening to me, particularly when we look at the outbreak that took place in Ohio at Elkton Correctional Institution, as well as, I can't remember, the Marion Correctional Institution. Now, when we begin to think about where we're at today, particularly in light of the COVID-19 crisis, one of the things that I'm pushing for, particularly with legislators here in New York, is the fact that a lot of what's happening, as Jody said, about paperwork being submitted in a particular time and a particular time frame, I don't believe in that, because I do not believe that we're in a normal time for us to be trying to follow bureaucratic red tape and protocols. Right now, we have individuals who are dying within prisons who are being impacted by the COVID-19 virus. Right now, we're passing laws in our general society that institute social distancing, that institute not being in groups of people. If any of you are like me, and I've studied, and not only, let me say this also, I don't just study criminal justice reform or forensic justice in the capacity of my academic profession. I'm also a person who spent over 19 years of my life in and out of prison. So I'm telling you, when they told me, and I started looking at the broadcast and the news broadcast of the idea of practicing social distancing in a carceral state or in a correctional institution, I knew it was policy from day one, because it's practically impossible to practice any type of social distancing in such a place. One of the challenges that our governments have had, and I will say this, it's not so much the idea of this being what's right or moral. The problem that's taken place with politicians across the country in regards to releasing those individuals who have been impacted by COVID-19 and who are at risk of COVID-19 is more the politics of it. And we can never excuse that, because when you hear public safety, when you hear the idea of placing the welfare of the general population at risk, that risk is not the health condition of myself or any of us who would have been incarcerated. That risk for those individuals in their dog whistle language is their political careers. What does this look like if we release these people into the community? What does this look like if we allow this compassionate release, although this was implemented back in March under the CARES Act for individuals who were elderly, high risk, or those who were terminally ill? I was on a call today with a young lady by the name of Mrs. Veronica Cunningham, who was recently released 1 week and 3 days ago. And she shared with me the conditions in which men and women, particularly that she was at this women's facility, are suffering in light of the failure of the Bureau of Prisons throughout our country. It is my hope and it is my prayer that through these interactions that we have here in these spaces, the times that we have to engage, that our conversations do not stop at mere talk or engagement in this capacity. But there are a few things that have been said that I fully agree with. There has to be a unified message that we as a collective body take and move forward. One of the most rewarding things that I find about being in this space right here, right now, is that there are advocates from across the country on this Zoom call today. And I want to say thank you to Plus. I do a lot of work locally with individuals here in New York City as well as New York State. I work with individuals in California, but this is, I think, one of the first spaces that I've been in where there are collective voices of individuals from across the country. And that's going to be very critical. And the reason I want to say to you and let you know how critical it is because in the past, couple of months, I would say, year and a half, the issue of criminal justice reform has now reached the national platform, a platform in which we're hearing about decarceration. We're hearing about compassion. We're hearing about empathy. We're hearing about the 94 crime bill, and there's an individual who is running for president who actually penned that 94 crime bill, and that individual name is Joe Biden. Now, not to divert from my subject matter on COVID-19 and the implications of what that has within our criminal justice system, which I think each of you know. But I do want to highlight the importance of a call to action that demands that Joe Biden repeal the 94 crime bill. I think it is critically important that as each of us in our own respective states begin to submit petitions on behalf of those individuals who apply for and meet the requirements for compassionate releases, which is why this legislation was made and was passed. And that decision should not be at the behest of a warden of a correctional institution anywhere. If a law is passed, and just as if they ask us to, uphold and stand by the law, then that law should also be upheld and stood by the Bureau of Prisons, not only on behalf of those individuals who are impacted by COVID-19 or where we're at today with this virus, but also really begin to look at what that looks like when we start thinking about reentry and the release of nonviolent low-level offenders, and to begin to look at the organization here called RAP that appeals on the behalf of the elderly. Because if we truly want to incarcerate as we say we do, then I think that, again, I do not want our cause to be politicized, not even in the name of someone saying, yes, we're going to do this, and they'll come and kiss our babies and do all this and listen to our this and that. And then once they get in office, they forget about those campaign promises. I think it's the responsibility of each and every individual on this phone and on this Zoom call today to hold responsible those elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. There is a question, and this is for, let's see. Hold on, Carlos. Carlos, you still there? Did we lose Carlos? Okay, then anybody else? How do you go about starting a program in a prison? That is the question. I don't see him. Anybody?
Is that state or federal? State or federal?
They didn't say. They just said, "How do you start a program?"
Like most of the time,
I would say state.
Okay. Well, most of the time, if it's state, you have to get with the warden. It depends on what type of program it is. If it's a religious program, you have to get with they have a region, like each state has a director that's over the religious program, over the inmate educational program. So you have to get with the state directors. And it's different with the feds. And the feds, each institution have their own directors who are over the institution there, whether it's a complex or anything like that. But in the state, you have to, if it's a religious type program, if it's a reentry program, you have to get with the warden, and the warden will assign you somebody to help you implement that program. So that's one of the things that I'm learning, because I'm trying to get a reentry program started here in the state of Mississippi in the state. So I'm supposed to meet with the state director over the Mississippi Department of Corrections to show him my blueprint for a reentry program, to kind of help guys transition from the system back to the streets, especially if they've done more than 5 years. But everybody needs help in some way, shape, form, or fashion, whether it's with driver license or anything, but that's just one of the ways. So I think you have to get with the director first, and then kind of like lay your plan out to him, set up a meeting with them. I hope that helps.
Yes, I think I would like to jump in. Mainly at the state level, they usually have what we call program directors, and you usually have an opportunity to submit whatever the outline plan is. That plan is then introduced to a committee board within within the prison system, which they'll kind of go through it, and then it usually meets needs the requirement or the approval of the warden. They usually take it through a stringent process of understanding the dynamics of the program, what is the outcome of the program, and all those things in that regards. But they usually have what we call ORCs or program directors within the prisons that you can introduce a plan to, or whatever that program may be, and they usually try to find a way to institute it if, and I have to say this part, if it meets the requirements of a correctional institution. And again, that's one of those areas which I'm a bit leery on. So I'll just say that.
Okay, and this is the next question. This is for whoever. Why is the First Step Act only for federal and not state as well?
Well, let's answer that because the federal is the first one to implement even though most states have their own version of injustice laws, like, maybe in New York, they call it draconian drug laws. But with the federal, they had when the mandatory in 1987 under Reagan, when they implemented the war on drugs and the mandatory minimums, what they did was the first step was their way of trying to make right the 100 to 1. You had a lot of guys. What they did, they changed the crack law in 2008 because the crack law didn't affect anybody who got sentenced before 2008. It was only for the guys who got sentenced in 2008 and and current. So what they did in 2010, it was so many guys left behind who were still under the 101, which was me and still a few more, like the guys that just got out, Rufus Rochelle and Phyllis Walls and a whole bunch more, like Marcus Boyd, who are still trapped inside under the 101 guideline. They're still caught up in that injustice. So what Congress did was try to alleviate us being left behind, because we were in essence left behind under the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010. So it took them 10 years to reach back and say, okay, we're going to make this retroactive. And then,
can I piggyback on that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Jody.
I just want to piggyback on that because, again, it's because that was that came from the federal government, but it has trickled down to states. We say the First Step Act, okay, then let's look at Arizona, the laws that are being, overturned right now with juveniles. There's laws in Pennsylvania. Maybe Texas is behind. But really, we are seeing some of the exact same things that you see in the First Step Act for the federal. We're seeing it already trickle down to the states, the same juvenile laws. I mean, it's there. They just gonna call it different because it's being implemented in state court, two totally different courts. You can't, you know what I mean? You can't say, well, why federal, not state, but it is trickling down, and you will see it, and people have to go and find their state and figure out what laws are comparable to the First Step Act laws and go fight for them and get these politicians to, you know what I mean? So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to butt in, but that's really it. It really is both federal and state. It's just called different because it was in different courts, it was in different court systems, So anyway.
Okay, and the next question is for whoever. What can we do to bring awareness for compassionate release?
Well, one of the first things that we can always begin to do, particularly surrounding raising awareness around compassionate release, is begin to really utilize our social media outlets and handles to to raise those concerns, to get involved in those compassionate release rallies that are taking place. There are a lot of petitions that are going around right now that you can tap into and share on your social media, with your friends, with your families, and also begin to raise those issues with legislators in those particular states for individuals you may or may not know, because the main focus is whether it impacts one person or 1,000. It's the fact that the compassionate release is there. So it's very, very, very important that we begin to continually not let this kind of just float, to blow by, because sometimes what I've learned in my own work and my profession is that some people may think they can hold out longer than you, and we have to, be determined to hold out a little bit longer and raising and continuing to raise these concerns in these profiles and in these spaces and continually talking about them.
And sign those petitions. Don't just roll by those petitions. They do make a difference. Don't just roll by, because if it was your loved one or somebody you knew, all you've got to do is give them maybe your name and your email. Sign the petitions. That is so important. Just please sign them.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Jody. And that is one of the things I've met with 2 families already, which me through my work with United Coalition of Freedom, that we've been speaking with these families and we raise petitions on their behalf. So as Jody said, when you see these things, I know it can, and what's the scary part? Let me say this. It's scary and it's hurting. It's when you see one, you realize there are so many people, those who have family members to raise the issue around the petition itself or raise a petition on their behalf, and those who don't. We have people who are dying right now in prison. I got a report out of Florida today that there was a gentleman who suffered from COVID-19. He was on a respirator. They took him off the respirator, put him in general population. He died 5 days later. These are the issues. When I talk about advocacy, when I talk about doing this work, when I talk about putting ourselves in it, this is what this is about. I don't care if you have to write a petition to your state legislator asking, are we practicing compassionate releases? And we continue to push it. And with those individuals, you sign that petition and say, we want compassionate release in our state or in our city. And you get people to sign that, and you get that sent up to that legislator, whoever that may or may not be in your community.
Okay. Terrence, did you have something you wanted to say?
Me? No, I think I said it.
No, the other one. Your underwriter.
Hey, how are y'all doing? First, this is Terrence from the United Panther Movement. First off, I want to say all power to the people. A couple things I was thinking about while I was listening to everyone else talk. Out of the topics here, one of them is unity/violence, but I want to really focus on the unity part. A lot of work I've heard has been going through kind of like the institutional methods, and us at the United Panther Movement and the New African Black Panther Party, we're revolutionary organizations, and so we've pretty much got to the point where we realize that the prison industrial system is a business and a huge part of capitalism, and it's part of what helps this country runs. The 13th Amendment legalizing slavery is because the enslavement of Black people is essentially what makes this country, run the way that they want it to run. So one of our methods, and this is the link to Carlos also, when Carlos was talking about raising the consciousness and changing your mindset, to us, that's heavily important. So I just wanted to kind of like give you the example of just something that we've been doing to counteract that. And since our organization was initially started in prison by prisoners, part of the outside element is to contact people that are incarcerated, form a relationship. A lot of them have like gang backgrounds and stuff. And so what we're trying to do is and what we are doing essentially is turning that criminal mentality into a more of a revolutionary mentality by giving giving our comrades the education to realize what the situation they are in, and giving them the opportunity to change that by giving them the education, letting them know how to organize and how to also uplift other people, and essentially laying those seeds inside of the prisons. Because like we tried to do a program, they won't let us anywhere. They won't let us anywhere near that prison. They will not. They do not want us. They send me shit back. Oh, well, sorry for cursing, but they send me stuff back all the time. Like I got to remail the same letter 3-4 times, different envelopes and stuff, just because they, even in the form, they're like, this is a danger to the prison, So, I just wanted to kind of like think about more direct ways of raising these consciousness. As that was just like a quick example. We also have a fund to drop on the books too, because we know you can't survive without the money. And it's we need that unified front, because we need folks that are doing like the law side of it. We need folks that are doing the legal ways as well, but we also need folks doing the underground stuff, the more clandestine, if you will, because it's going to take all of us in our many different roles to attack the beast that is the prison industrial complex. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Well, Terrence, I want to say to you, I've worked with a lot of different groups who have the fortitude and the stamina to reach our men. But as I shared, what I have learned, and this is when the young lady, whoever asked about the programs, those are some of the challenges that I've seen, that sometimes programs are selected by individuals there at the institutional level that meet their approval, and not looking at the outcomes, or they don't care about the outcomes or the impact of what our presence or our work can have in the lives of men. It becomes something very different for them. So sometimes I find that a bit challenging, and that's what I was pretty much hinting at. But you said it for me. Sometimes, I've worked with various groups that, to have them send letters in, and they get those same letters back that this may pose a threat to the well-being or the whatever the institution, and yet and still we have these same programs right here on the streets that are really impacting and changing the lives of so many young men and women in our communities.
Does anybody else have anything they would like to say? The floor is yours.
Okay, everybody. Well, stay tuned. We'll be on the same time tomorrow.
And I'd like to thank all the speakers for speaking for Plus today. And everybody, please join us back tomorrow. We'll have some more speakers. Y'all, we're very grateful that y'all came on and helped our cause here.
Thank you.
Are we going to be able to share it live tomorrow also? Those of us who are not speaking?
Yes.
Live video. So, okay, well, I think we should get that out early so we can get it out live, and everybody needs to share it and invite friends to listen so that we can start a unified effort like Terrence said. We have to educate people so thank you. Thank you for having me, and I'll be here tomorrow. Same time, same place.